She stood near the bus stop with her phone pressed tightly in her hand, staring at the screen without really seeing it. The evening air was loud with traffic and distant voices, but inside her mind everything felt heavy and silent at the same time. Her name was Aisha, and at that moment, her life felt like it was slipping out of control faster than she could hold on. Tomorrow was coming too quickly, and she was not ready for it. Aisha was not the kind of person who complained out loud. She had always handled her problems quietly, keeping her worries hidden behind a calm face. But that day had been different. The call she had received earlier kept replaying in her head again and again. Her family had made it clear. If she showed up to the engagement ceremony alone, the questions would not stop. The judgment would be harsh, and the pressure would be unbearable. They had already decided how her life should look, and tomorrow was the deadline. She had tried to explain. She had said she needed time. She had said she was working, trying to build something for herself. None of it mattered. In their eyes, success meant stability, and stability meant having a partner by your side. Someone respectable, someone visible, someone who could silence the whispers. As she stood there, her phone buzzed again. A message from her aunt appeared on the screen, short and direct, reminding her of tomorrow and asking if everything was settled. Aisha's throat tightened. She felt her chest grow warm with panic. She turned away from the road and took a few steps back, as if distance could soften the pressure. Without realizing it, she spoke. Her voice was low, tired, and full of truth. "I need a partner by tomorrow," she said, almost like a whisper. It was not meant for anyone else. It was the kind of sentence people say when they have reached the edge and have nowhere left to go. She laughed softly after saying it, not because it was funny, but because it sounded so unreal. How could someone find a partner overnight? The idea felt impossible, almost embarrassing. She ran her hand through her hair and looked up at the darkening sky, blinking quickly to stop the tears from falling. What she did not know was that someone had heard her. A few feet away, inside a black luxury car, stopped at the traffic signal. A man sat quietly, his window slightly open. His name was Daniel, and most people knew him only by reputation. He was a millionaire, self-made, respected, and powerful. His days were filled with meetings, numbers, and decisions that moved millions. But at that moment, none of that mattered. Her words had reached him clearly. Simple, honest, heavy. "I need a partner by tomorrow." Daniel turned his head slightly and saw her standing there, unaware, looking lost and exhausted. She did not look dramatic or desperate in a loud way. She looked real, and that was what made the sentence hit him harder than expected. He had heard many requests in his life. People asked him for money, favors, opportunities. They usually rehearsed their words carefully. But this was different. There was no plan in her voice. No performance. Just pressure and fear mixed together. Daniel leaned back in his seat, surprised by the sudden feeling in his chest. He did not know her. He had no reason to care. Yet something about the way she stood there, alone in a crowd, felt familiar. It reminded him of a time years ago, before the money, before the success, when he had stood alone with his own impossible deadlines and silent struggles. The traffic light turned green, but Daniel did not move immediately. The driver glanced at him through the mirror, confused. Daniel raised a hand slightly, signaling him to wait. His eyes were still on Aisha. She checked her phone again, sighed, and slowly began to walk away from the bus stop. Each step looked heavy, like she was carrying more than just her bag. Daniel felt a strange conflict rise inside him. Logic told him to move on. This was none of his business. Emotion told him something else entirely. For the first time in years, he questioned his own routine, his rules, his distance from people's lives. As the car finally moved forward, Daniel kept thinking about that one sentence. He did not yet know why it mattered to him so much. He did not know that this small, accidental moment was about to change the direction of two lives. All he knew was that something had shifted quietly but clearly the moment those words were spoken into the air. Daniel did not usually think about strangers after a moment passed. His life had trained him to move fast, forget quickly, and focus only on results. People came and went, faces blurred together, voices faded into background noise. But as the car moved through the traffic, the sound of that woman's words stayed with him like an echo he could not silence. I need a partner by tomorrow. The sentence was simple, yet it carried weight. Daniel loosened his tie slightly and stared out the window, watching the city lights pass by. He told himself it was nothing, just a tired woman saying something dramatic under stress. He had heard worse, seen worse. Still, his mind refused to let it go. He remembered being young, standing alone outside a small rented office, holding rejection letters in his hand. Back then, he had needed help too. Not money exactly, but belief. Someone to stand beside him and say, "You're not alone." No one had done that. He had survived anyway, building walls around his emotions along with his success. The driver stopped the car at the next signal. Daniel glanced at his watch. He had a meeting in 20 minutes, another contract to finalize, another decision to make. His life was perfectly scheduled. There was no space for random detours. Yet, without planning it, he leaned forward and said, "Stop the car." The driver looked surprised, but obeyed, pulling over near the sidewalk. Daniel stepped out, the cool evening air hitting his face. He adjusted his coat and scanned the area. For a brief second, he wondered if he had imagined her. Then he saw her, a few steps ahead, walking slowly, shoulders slightly bent, as if the weight of the world rested there. He followed her at a distance, unsure of what he was even doing. This was not like him. He did not approach strangers. He did not involve himself in personal dramas. Every step felt unnatural, yet his feet kept moving. Aisha stopped near a small tea stall, pretending to look at the menu though her mind was elsewhere. Daniel stood a few feet away, debating with himself. He could turn back now, get into his car, forget this ever happened. That was the smart choice. Instead, he cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said calmly. Aisha turned, startled. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw him. He looked confident, well-dressed, completely out of place in her tired evening. Her first instinct was suspicion. She had learned to be careful. "Yes?" she asked, her voice guarded. Daniel hesitated for a fraction of a second, choosing his words carefully. "I couldn't help but overhear you earlier," he said honestly. "At the bus stop." Her face flushed immediately. Embarrassment rushed in, followed by irritation. "I was talking to myself," she replied quickly. "I didn't mean—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "I'm not here to judge. I just wanted to ask if you're okay." No one had asked her that all day. The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth to give a polite answer, then stopped. Her strength slipped for a moment. "I will be," she said quietly. Daniel nodded, accepting the half-truth. He could see the stress in her eyes, the exhaustion behind the words. He took a small breath and did something he never did. "I might sound strange," he said, "but would you be willing to talk for a few minutes?" Every warning bell in her head rang at once. Rich or not, stranger or not, this was risky. Yet something about his tone felt respectful, not demanding. And honestly, she had nowhere else to be. They sat on a nearby bench, the city buzzing around them. Daniel listened more than he spoke. Aisha did not share every detail, but enough slipped out. Family pressure, expectations, the fear of being judged for standing alone. Daniel felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. He realized how easily people assumed that independence meant strength, and how often loneliness hid behind it. After a pause, he spoke slowly. "What if," he said, "you didn't have to face tomorrow alone?" She looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He met her eyes, his voice steady but serious. "What if I help you? Just for one day?" The silence between them felt heavy. Aisha searched his face, trying to understand if this was a joke, a trick, or something else entirely. Her heart beat faster. "You don't even know me," she said. Daniel nodded. "That's true. And you don't know me either. But sometimes help comes from unexpected places." The idea sounded unreal, dangerous, impossible. Yet desperation has a way of making impossible things feel like the only option left. As the city lights flickered on around them, both knew that this conversation was no longer small. A line had been crossed, and whatever happened next would change more than just tomorrow. Aisha did not answer him right away. The words hung between them, heavy and confusing. "Help you just for one day." Her mind raced, trying to understand what kind of man would make such an offer to a stranger. Every lesson she had ever learned told her to walk away. This was risky. This was unreal. This was not how real life worked. She stood up slowly, gripping the strap of her bag. "I think you should go," she said, forcing firmness into her voice. "I don't know you, and this doesn't make sense." Daniel expected resistance. He did not argue or try to persuade her quickly. He simply nodded. "That's fair," he said. "I wouldn't trust me either if I were you." That honesty surprised her. Most people defended themselves. He did not. He remained seated, calm, as if he had already accepted the possibility that she would walk away. Something about that made her pause. "Then why offer?" she asked, turning back. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Because I heard fear in your voice," he said. "And because I know what it feels like to face something alone when you shouldn't have to." The streetlight above them flickered softly. Aisha studied his face, searching for signs of arrogance or hidden intent. She saw none, only seriousness, control, and something else she could not name. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked carefully. Daniel took a breath. "Nothing permanent, nothing complicated, just presence. If you need someone to stand beside you tomorrow, I can do that. No money, no pressure, no expectations." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "That sounds like something from a movie." He allowed a small smile. "I know. That's why I'm being clear. You can say no, and this ends here." Silence settled again. Aisha thought of her family's eyes, the whispers, the shame they would not hide. She thought of walking into that room alone, feeling small. Then she thought of this stranger, offering exactly what she needed without asking for anything in return. "What do you get out of this?" she asked. Daniel did not answer immediately. He looked at the road, then back at her. "Maybe nothing," he said. "Maybe perspective. Or maybe I just need to remind myself that life is more than meetings and numbers." That answer felt real. Too real to be fake. Aisha exhaled slowly. "If I agree," she said, "there are rules." "I'd expect nothing less," Daniel replied. She counted them on her fingers. No line that hurt someone. No control. "And after tomorrow, we walk away." Daniel nodded. "Agreed." They exchanged phone numbers, the act feeling strangely serious for something meant to last only one day. As she walked away, her legs felt weak, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of what she had just agreed to. That night, neither of them slept well. Daniel sat alone in his apartment, city lights glowing through the windows. He replayed the conversation again and again, questioning himself. He had spent years building a life where emotions were carefully managed and risks were calculated. And now, he had stepped into something unpredictable for no clear reason. Aisha lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her phone rested beside her, silent. She wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life or the bravest decision. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, only that it would not be faced alone. Morning came faster than expected. Daniel arrived early, dressed simply but neatly, no signs of wealth beyond quiet confidence. When Aisha saw him, something inside her settled slightly. He looked normal, human. They exchanged a brief greeting, both aware of how unreal the situation still felt. "Ready?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. During the drive, they spoke little. The city passed by outside the window, each street bringing them closer to the moment that mattered. Daniel noticed how Aisha straightened her posture, how she took a deep breath before they arrived. When they stepped out of the car, she hesitated. Daniel noticed and stopped beside her. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said quietly. "Just stand. I'll do the rest." She looked at him, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. "Thank you," she said, meaning more than she could explain. As they walked toward the building together, Aisha felt something shift. This was no longer just about surviving a day. Something unexpected was forming, something neither of them had planned. The building stood tall and quiet, its polished glass reflecting the morning light. Aisha paused at the entrance, her heart beating fast. People were already arriving, well-dressed, confident, moving as if they belonged there. This was her world for the day, and it felt unfamiliar and heavy. Daniel noticed her hesitation. Without saying anything, he slowed his steps so they walked side by side. Not ahead, not behind, just beside her. That small action gave her a bit of strength. She straightened her shoulders and took a deep breath before stepping inside. The moment they entered, eyes turned toward them. Some curious, some judging, some simply surprised. Aisha felt every look like a question. Who is he? Where did he come from? Why now? Her fingers tightened slightly, and Daniel noticed. He gently offered his arm, not forcing, just offering. After a brief pause, she took it. Inside, everything felt louder. Laughter echoed. Conversations overlapped. Familiar faces appeared. Faces that knew her story, but not this version of it. A woman approached first, smiling too widely. Aisha, she said warmly, then looked at Daniel. You didn't tell us you were bringing someone. Aisha opened her mouth, unsure what to say, but Daniel spoke first, calm and confident. Life has a way of surprising us, he said with a polite smile. The woman laughed, satisfied, and moved on. Aisha looked at him surprised. He had not lied. He had simply guided the moment forward. That eased her nerves a little. As they moved deeper into the room, Daniel observed quietly. He saw how Aisha became smaller around certain people, how her voice softened, how she smiled even when uncomfortable. He realized this was not just about one event. This was about years of expectations pressing down on her. Meanwhile, Aisha noticed something too. Daniel, despite clearly not belonging to this world, fit in effortlessly. He was respectful, attentive, never dominating the space. When someone asked him a question, he answered simply. No showing off. No ego. That surprised her more than anything. At one point, they were seated at a table with relatives. Questions began carefully, then more directly. Where did you meet? What does he do? How serious is this? Aisha felt the familiar pressure rise again, but before she could respond, Daniel placed his hand lightly on the table, grounding her. We're taking things one step at a time, he said. That feels right for both of us. His words were gentle but firm. The questions slowed. The tension eased. Later, when the attention shifted elsewhere, Aisha finally let out a long breath. You're really good at this, she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. I'm not acting, he replied. I'm just listening. They stepped outside for some air. The noise faded behind them, replaced by soft wind and distant traffic. For a moment, neither spoke. They just stood there, sharing the quiet. This isn't what I imagined, Aisha admitted. I thought I'd feel like a fraud. And now? Daniel asked. Now I just feel supported. The word hung between them. Supported. Daniel felt it too. In an unexpected way, being there for her made him feel present, connected, more alive than he had in a long time. When they returned inside, the mood had shifted. People looked at them differently now. Less suspicion, more acceptance. Aisha noticed the change and felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Why did it take someone beside her for her to be seen this way? As the event moved toward its end, emotions ran higher. A relative made a careless comment, something sharp disguised as concern. Aisha's smile faltered. Before she could react, Daniel spoke calmly but clearly, defending her without attacking anyone. The room went quiet for a moment. Then conversation resumed, awkward but changed. Aisha felt something inside her break and heal at the same time. When it was finally over, they walked out together, the building behind them, the pressure slowly lifting. Aisha felt exhausted but lighter. I couldn't have done this without you, she said softly. Daniel looked at her, realizing the truth in her words. Neither could I, he replied, surprising himself. They stood there for a moment, knowing something important had happened. This was no longer just an agreement for a day. They had stepped into each other's lives, and neither would walk away unchanged. The next morning felt heavier than usual. Aisha awoke with a flutter in her chest, the kind that comes before a storm. The event from the day before had ended, but the memory of the people, the questions, and Daniel's quiet support lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. She knew today was different. Today, she had to face the world outside that room, and yet, with Daniel beside her, it didn't feel as impossible. He arrived right on time, as if he had read her mind. Standing by the car, looking calm and composed, He offered a simple nod. "Ready?" he asked. His voice carried the same quiet authority that had made the impossible yesterday feel manageable. She nodded, adjusting her bag, taking a deep breath. As they stepped out, the city greeted them with its usual chaos. Horns blared, vendors called, people rushed past. But for Aisha, there was a sense of order now. Daniel's presence acted like an anchor. Every step she took felt steadier, more deliberate. She realized she hadn't noticed before how much tension she carried in her shoulders, how her hands shook even when she tried to appear composed. They arrived at the venue, this time a larger gathering with more people and higher stakes. Aisha's stomach twisted as familiar faces turned to look at her. Whispers ran across the room, low but unmistakable. She caught the glance of her relatives, waiting for her to falter. Daniel, noticing her hesitation, gently placed his hand on her elbow. It wasn't a grasp of control, just support, and it made all the difference. The entrance was tense. Aisha had rehearsed in her mind what she might say, how she could answer questions. But as soon as they stepped into the room, she realized rehearsals meant nothing. Real life was louder, faster, and messier. People approached, some curious, some judgmental, and some openly skeptical. The pressure rose immediately, threatening to suffocate her. Daniel stayed close, but he didn't overshadow her. When someone made a sharp comment about her appearance or implied doubts about her partner, he answered simply, with clarity and confidence. His words were measured, neutral, yet firm enough to command respect. Aisha noticed how people shifted slightly, as if realizing she wasn't alone this time. It wasn't just Daniel's wealth or status that made a difference. It was his presence, his composure, and the way he believed in her without needing to prove anything. Each time Aisha faltered under scrutiny, he was there, guiding silently, letting her take the lead when she could, stepping forward when she needed it. During a pause in the conversations, they moved toward a quieter corner. Aisha exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to thank you," she admitted. "I was so afraid. Yesterday, I thought I'd fail, but you made it feel manageable." Daniel shrugged slightly, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," he said. "I just listened and stood beside you. But I think sometimes that's all people need." Aisha looked at him, realizing he was right. All she had needed was someone who would see her, not the expectations, not the pressure, just her. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. As the event progressed, unexpected moments tested them further. A friend approached, teasing her, pushing boundaries in a way that made Aisha uncomfortable. Before she could respond, Daniel stepped in, calmly deflecting the comment without causing embarrassment. He handled it perfectly, protective but unobtrusive, giving her the space to regain her confidence. By the time the event was winding down, something remarkable had happened. People who had been skeptical now looked at her with newfound respect. Whispers were replaced by nods, smiles, and even subtle gestures of approval. Aisha realized that having Daniel there had changed how she was perceived, but more importantly, it had changed how she perceived herself. After it ended, they stepped outside into the cool evening air. Aisha felt lighter, her chest no longer tight with tension. She looked at Daniel, gratitude and admiration mixing in her gaze. "I don't think I could have handled that without you," she said softly. Daniel shook his head, his expression calm but thoughtful. "Neither could I," he admitted. For him, the day had been as revealing as it had been for her. He had gone in thinking this was a simple arrangement, just helping someone through a single day. But he realized he had invested more than time. He had become emotionally involved in ways he hadn't anticipated. They walked toward the car in silence, each reflecting on the day. Both knew that what began as a practical solution had evolved into something deeper, something neither of them had planned for. And as the city lights glimmered around them, both realized that tomorrow and the days after would never be quite the same. The night after the event was quieter than either of them expected. Aisha sat on her bed, the city lights spilling through her window, reflecting in her eyes. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. She had survived the day, more than survived. She had stood tall, faced questions, handled scrutiny, and, somehow, done it without losing herself. And yet, the thought of what had happened with Daniel gnawed at her. She could not stop replaying moments. His calm voice when someone doubted her, the gentle touch of his hand on her elbow, the way he let her lead when she needed to. She wondered why a man she barely knew would go so far. Not for attention, not for show, but simply to stand beside her. It didn't make sense. And that made her question everything about the day, about herself, and about the stranger who had become her unexpected anchor. Meanwhile, Daniel was in his apartment, pacing quietly. He had left her side reluctantly, but he couldn't escape the feeling that he had crossed a boundary he didn't fully understand. He was used to decisions that had clear outcomes, numbers, contracts, deadlines, but this was different. He had invested emotionally in someone he didn't even know, someone whose life existed entirely separate from his. And for some reason, he didn't regret it. The following morning brought an unexpected challenge. Aisha's family, unaware of how the previous day had gone, called her urgently. There had been questions, rumors, and subtle hints of disappointment, even suspicion. They wanted to know who Daniel was, why he had been there, and whether she could trust him. Aisha felt her chest tighten, the familiar anxiety returning. She knew she could not explain the full truth without revealing the awkward and private nature of their agreement. She paused, realizing she had never felt this conflicted before. The pressure she had carried for years was colliding with something new. Trust. Daniel sensed the tension before she even called him. When she did, her voice trembled slightly. "They're asking questions about you," she said. "I'll handle it," he replied calmly, though his mind was already racing. He had built walls around his life for years, and now he had to navigate a world he didn't belong to. He could feel the scrutiny, the judgment, and yet he didn't hesitate. When he arrived at her home, the atmosphere was thick with expectation. Relatives were polite but probing, trying to assess him through thin smiles and subtle glances. Daniel remained composed, answering questions honestly and respectfully, never over-explaining, never exaggerating. He understood that appearances mattered, but authenticity mattered more. Aisha watched from the side, her heart pounding. She was amazed by the way he carried himself, how his confidence and calmness diffused tension without overshadowing her. She realized that what she had thought of as a simple arrangement had evolved into a partnership of sorts, one built on mutual understanding, trust, and quiet respect. After the questioning subsided, they stepped into the garden for air. Aisha turned to him, uncertainty in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Daniel looked at her thoughtfully. "Maybe that's exactly why," he said. "Sometimes when you see someone struggling, you help, not for recognition, not for reward, but because it feels like the right thing to do. I've spent years building walls, following rules, and measuring success by numbers. But life is not just numbers." His words sank deep into her. She felt a sense of gratitude and confusion all at once. There was something rare here, something neither of them could ignore. The day continued, bringing more challenges, more questions, and more moments that tested their patience and resolve. But through it all, a rhythm formed between them. They were learning to move together, respond to situations together, and support each other in ways that neither expected. By evening, Aisha realized she was no longer just grateful. She was beginning to feel a connection that went beyond the arrangement they had made. And Daniel, for the first time in a long time, felt his own walls beginning to crack. They stood together quietly, watching the sun set. The world had not changed, but their perception of it had. They both knew that what started as a desperate need had turned into something much more complicated, much more real, and much more meaningful than either could have anticipated. The unexpected decision that had brought them together was no longer just a choice for a single day. It was shaping a bond neither of them could ignore, and neither knew where it would lead. The days that followed were quieter, yet heavier, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Aisha tried to return to normal life, but normal felt impossible. Every time she thought about Daniel, Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with something else, something she didn't have a name for. She had expected the day to end, the arrangement to dissolve, and yet his presence lingered in her mind, uninvited but undeniable. Daniel, too, felt the weight of their shared experience. He had returned to his routine, meetings, numbers, contracts, but found them hollow, dull compared to the intensity of the days he had spent with her. He realized that helping Aisha was no longer just an act of kindness. It had become personal. And for the first time in years, he questioned what he truly wanted, not in business, but in life. It was a quiet Saturday morning when Aisha received a call. Her family had made plans for a casual gathering, a test of sorts, to see how things were. She hesitated before answering, unsure if she was ready to face them again. After a deep breath, she asked, almost without thinking, "Will you come with me?" Daniel's reply was immediate, calm, but firm. "Yes, I'll be there." When they arrived, the room was full of familiar faces. Some smiled politely, some stared suspiciously, and some whispered behind polite hands. Aisha's heart raced. She had rehearsed responses for every question, every look, every whisper. But Daniel's presence beside her gave her courage she didn't know she had. The first round of questions came quickly, testing both of them. Who is he? How do you know each other? Why is he here? Aisha answered as best she could, but her nervousness was obvious. Daniel stepped forward, calmly filling in details without overshadowing her. He spoke honestly, respectfully, and with an authority that demanded attention without arrogance. Aisha watched him carefully. Each time someone doubted, whispered, or probed, Daniel remained composed. But she noticed something subtle. His eyes never left her for long. He was not just defending her in front of others. He was protecting her in a way that went deeper than appearances. As the gathering continued, Aisha realized that people were beginning to accept him, not because of his wealth, his status, or his confidence, but because of the quiet integrity he displayed. He did not try to impress. He did not try to dominate. He simply stood beside her, unwavering, reliable, and human. After the formal part of the gathering ended, Aisha and Daniel found themselves alone in the garden. The evening sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. For a moment, the chaos of the day melted away, leaving only the two of them. "I don't understand why you're doing this," Aisha said softly. Her voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the intensity of her emotions. "Why go so far for someone you barely know?" Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable at first. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Because sometimes, when you see someone struggling, you recognize yourself in them. And because I realize life is too short to measure everything by rules and walls. I couldn't let you face tomorrow alone, even if it meant stepping into something unexpected." Aisha's chest tightened. She had expected help, but she had not expected honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to risk for her sake. Her mind raced with possibilities she could not fully grasp. Daniel continued, "I've spent my life building walls, chasing success, and protecting myself. But with you, something feels different. I don't know where this will lead, but I know I can't walk away now." Aisha looked at him, searching his eyes, seeing the truth she had hoped for, but never dared to imagine. Her heart whispered that what had begun as a simple, desperate arrangement had grown into something far deeper, something neither of them could ignore. The moment stretched, filled with unspoken understanding. Neither knew what the future held, but both recognized the turning point. This was no longer about one day, one favor, or one arrangement. This was about trust, courage, and the unexpected bonds that life sometimes forces upon us. Finally, she took a deep breath, her voice steady. "Then let's face it together." Daniel nodded. In that quiet agreement, both of them felt the gravity of what had happened. The decision he had made, the one that seemed small and simple at the start, was no longer just about helping. It was about choosing to step into the unknown, to embrace the risk, and to let life lead them both to a future they had never imagined. And for the first time, both felt the truth of it. Some decisions, no matter how unexpected, can change everything. The air was crisp that morning, carrying a sense of finality and possibility all at once. Aisha stood by the window, looking out at the city that had watched her grow through fear, hesitation, and courage. Tomorrow would no longer feel like a test, a challenge, or a deadline. Instead, it felt like a beginning. The past days had changed everything. Not just her circumstances, but the way she viewed herself and the people who mattered in her life. Daniel arrived quietly, as always, but today there was something different in his presence. No longer just a calm protector or a practical partner for a day. He carried an energy that was unspoken, subtle, but undeniable. Aisha felt at the moment she opened the door. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, they both seemed aware of how much they had crossed paths, not just physically, but emotionally. They walked to the place where everything had begun, the event, the challenge, the day that had demanded courage from her and unexpected openness from him. But this time, there was no tension, no pressure. There was only understanding. Both of them had stepped into the lives of the other, and neither could ignore the change it had brought. People greeted them differently now. The whispers and the judging eyes were gone, replaced by acknowledgement and a quiet respect. Aisha moved through the room with a newfound confidence, and Daniel observed silently, not guiding her this time, but simply walking beside her as an equal. At one point, a distant relative approached, the one who had been skeptical from the beginning. They looked at Daniel carefully, trying to measure him. But Daniel did not feel the need to prove anything. He smiled politely, answered honestly, and then let it be. Aisha realized, in that moment, that strength was not loud or aggressive. It was quiet, steady, and consistent. Later, as they stepped outside into the fading light of day, the city seemed different. Not because the city had changed, but because they had changed. They had moved through chaos, judgment, and fear together, and emerged with clarity. Aisha turned to Daniel, gratitude and something more shining in her eyes. "I never thought one day could change so much," she said softly. Daniel shook his head, a small smile forming. "Neither did I," he admitted. "I thought I was helping you. But I realize now, you helped me too." Aisha felt a warmth in her chest, a combination of relief and hope. The desperation that had defined her life for so long had lifted. In its place was a sense of possibility, one that didn't depend on perfection, wealth, or status, but on connection, trust, and courage. For the first time, they both understood the unspoken truth between them. Life's most meaningful moments often come when you step beyond comfort, when you risk vulnerability, and when you let someone walk beside you, even if it seems impossible. They walked together, side by side, toward the horizon where the city lights met the sky. No one could predict the future. They did not need to. What mattered was the moment, the understanding that they had faced the impossible together and had come through stronger, wiser, and more aware of what truly mattered. Before parting for the evening, Daniel reached out, not with obligation, but with intention. "No matter what comes next," he said quietly, "we face it as it comes. Together, if we choose." Aisha smiled, feeling a freedom she had not known in years. Together, she agreed. As they went their separate ways for the night, there was no tension, no fear, no unspoken anxiety. Just the quiet knowledge that one decision, one unexpected act of courage, had created something neither could have predicted. It had turned desperation into hope, strangers into companions, and a single day into a life-changing experience. That night, both of them slept with a calm neither had felt before. They knew that tomorrow might bring uncertainty, challenges, or surprises. But they also knew that they had faced the impossible together, and that, more than anything, made them ready for whatever life had in store. Sometimes, the most unexpected decisions are the ones that change everything. And in that quiet certainty, both Aisha and Daniel understood the truth. Life is unpredictable, but courage, kindness, and connection can transform even the most desperate moments into something extraordinary.